Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for FACCM's Legislative Pre-Session Town Hall. My name is Henry McCorkle, and I serve as the Vice President of Membership and Marketing at the Florida Association for Child Care Management, or FACCM. Many of you are already FACCM members, but for those of you who are not familiar with FACCM, we are the leading voice for early learning and child care centers across Florida. Whether through legislative advocacy, networking, or exclusive resources, we empower centers to thrive while ensuring the best outcomes for children and families. And so we're thrilled to have you with us today as we discuss important legislative updates impacting early childhood education in Florida. Before we get started, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. The first is that today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with you afterwards for reference. Secondly, this is a webinar format, so while you won't be visible or audible to others during this webinar, we do encourage you to participate by typing questions into the Q&A or the chat, and we will have a designated segment later on in the presentation for Q&A. We've prepared an informative agenda for you, and we're excited to get started. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Tripp Crouch, FACCM's Board President. Tripp has a long history with FACCM, having served on FACCM's board for 11 years. Tripp owns and operates 6 schools in the Tampa Bay area and serves on the Hillsborough and Pasco County coalitions. So with that, Tripp, I will turn it over to you.
Henry, thank you. And thank you for setting this up. And listen, welcome everybody that's attending and watching. We've got a busy legislative session coming up as always. So I appreciate you guys taking an interest in it and then hopefully giving us some feedback on what your concerns are, what you're seeing out there in the industry. So like Henry said, 11 years, I joined the board about 11 years ago. I became board president right as the pandemic was starting. So that was interesting timing on my part. And so I've kind of been doing this a little while. Like Henry said, my family's been in childcare this is our 46th year. And we had 7 schools at one point, and we sold a school a couple of years ago during the pandemic, actually. And so we have 6 now. And we're doing okay. We've done better, but we're building back up. Staffing's a little bit of a challenge, and enrollment's a tiny bit of a challenge, but we're okay. But there's just, it's a challenging environment we're operating in now, like I'm sure a lot of you all can appreciate. So anyway, I thought what I would do is tell you, introduce Daniel, our point person for our legislative efforts up in Tallahassee, and tell you a little bit how the FACCM board works with David to kind of set up this sort of information loop, feedback loop, so that he gets information on what's happening out in our world running schools every day. And then he can give us feedback on what he's hearing and seeing and finding out about in Tallahassee that stakeholders up there are looking to influence in our space. So anyway, David has been in legislative affairs for about 30 years. He can correct me if I'm wrong when this is done. He's been working with FACCM for about 10 years. I had that right by a year or two, maybe. And he's, like I said, he's with FACCM Partners. They're a consulting and lobbying firm up in Tallahassee, very well thought of. They have an entire team of lobbyists and consultants that work with a host of companies, and we're one of them, and we get to use all of their expertise, but our point person is David, and he's been our point person, like I said, for the last 10 years or so. Before he was with FACCM Partners, he was the Vice President of Governmental Affairs for the Florida Chamber of Commerce. So a long history of working with business owners, and especially small business owners like childcare providers in the state. So he knows their unique perspective. And then, like I said, he's been in the childcare space working with FACCM for 10 years, so he's pretty familiar. Generally, David will come to many board meetings a year with FACCM that our board has. Our board's we buy and sell. We've got some ambitious people on the board, probably 24, 25 schools that we own and operate collectively as a board. And I think we're represented in 9 of the coalitions across the state. I'm in Hillsborough and in Pasco County, Pasco Hernando, my schools. I'm not actually on the coalition boards. I didn't want to imply that earlier. I just have schools that are in those that are serviced by those coalitions, so I'm familiar with them. So anyway, I think the board as a whole has a good perspective across the state of the challenges, and so we will talk about our issues. We meet regularly. Lots of things come up, how DCF, to how what the coalitions are doing, to what DEL is doing, to how, how quickly are we getting fingerprintings back? How's it going on scheduling testing for new employees? What grants have been like over the years, what different coalitions are doing what. And David lends an ear to all of that and hears it. And then on the flip side of that, in Tallahassee, there's the Department of Children and Families that has a big responsibility to keep children safe, make sure that good child care providers, are the ones running the show and not the bad providers are being taken care of. And then we've got, all the coalitions, of course, the 31 coalitions across the state and what they're doing. Then there's the Department of Early Learning, huge responsibility to try to increase readiness for our little ones in the state, which everyone is obviously for, to get them ready for kindergarten so that they're ready for their third grade reading test and they're graduating at higher numbers and moving on to college and serving our state well. So DEL has a big job and they're always looking to improve the quality of early learning in the state. You've got legislators who are interested in early learning and early education and in providing affordable child care for the workers of our state, and they have ideas and things that they want to do. So David keeps track of all of those things that those agencies and legislators want to do and bills that could move through and things the agencies want to do, reflects it back to us as a board, and then we give him our opinion back on what we think of those and how we could influence those. And so an interesting way to think about it is, like I said, I think DCF has a big responsibility for child safety, and we can appreciate and respect that. DEL is a big responsibility for outcomes of early learning. We can appreciate that. The governor's office has opinions on how things should be run. We can respect that. We like to think that FACCM and through David and his firm, we try to look out for affordability of childcare, meaning that lots of good ideas are out there and lots of ways that we want things to run. But if we're not careful, if you pile 100 of those on top, even if each one individual is well-intended, that's going to be really expensive for working families in the state. That's all got to get passed through. And most of these great ideas come with expenses. And so FACCM tries to filter those and think, are there affordable options? Are there other ways to get to the same point? Is something practical, not practical, doable, not doable? Is it going to happen anyway so we can adjust and let our membership know? So I think this call is to sort of broaden the number of voices that are giving feedback to our legislative committee and then to David and to his people. And so David can sort of explain a little bit of what the environment is looking like right now, some things in Bill 47 and what we could have in store if that passes. And then we can get feedback from owners like yourselves on what you think of those. And if there's anything we're not thinking of, what you're seeing, what challenges you're facing, that maybe there could be a Tallahassee solution for. And so that's a little bit how FACCM works, our legislative team, and how we work with David and his people. And so I think now I will turn it over to David Daniel. Like I said, he's been with us about 10 years. He's our point person. He's very well versed in our industry. He's going to explain what the environment looks like this year and this session coming up, which I think is starting in March. David can give us the exact details on that and what we have to look forward to. And then we'll encourage some questions. You can type them out. I think Henry said we can type them in the thing. And if we get some feedback on what you think of what's in the current legislation as it's proposed, what your thoughts are on that versus what we're maybe missing and you would like to be looked at or addressed or sort of added to our list. David, was that a good enough introduction? Did that cover it?
Absolutely. I think so. So thank you, Tripp. So, good afternoon. Thank you for participating. These calls before session starts are so important to representing the childcare industry in Tallahassee. So I just want to say thank you for the work that you do. It's challenging work. I've often heard it said for folks that when I talk to people and they say, I work in government and politics. They say, well, man, I don't know how you do what you do every day. And with the, the politics and all that are involved. And I just have to say, I don't know how you as childcare owners do your work every day. It's a challenging job and a challenging environment to serve the families that you serve and the children that you serve. And so a big thank you for that. What I'd like to do in my time that I have with you is to give you a snapshot of legislation that has been filed this year, legislation or issues that are being talked about. And then I really need to open it up and just hear from, are we over the bomb, over the target on some of these legislation, or is there something that we're missing and we need to hear? Because the best way to advocate for you is to us to hear it directly from you. And so that would be, I think, a success. So I'm going to start off with House Bill 47 by State Representative Fiona McFarland. She's a Republican from Sarasota. You should have been given a document from FACCM earlier that is kind of breaks this bill down, but big picture, as we all know, the industry is struggling. We need more classrooms and teachers, and we need more money for the services that we provide. One of the challenges that we've heard for years is the overregulation by DCF. According to DCF's own research, when they were building the abbreviated inspection program, their research showed that there's some 537 rules that a child care facility that's licensed under 42305 has to comply with. But the research went on to say that only 47 of those are key indicators of quality. And so we've been really on this mission in representing you to say, can we focus on what matters and not focus on what doesn't matter? And then can we let folks who have a good history in childcare and with their inspections, can we get them into an abbreviated inspections program so that you can focus your resources, DCF, on providers that may be more challenged and may need some more assistance? And that's really the genesis of House Bill 47 by Representative McFarland. There's a couple key points that I wanted to talk to you about that are in these bullets. We've heard for particularly, I guess this was most acute after the COVID pandemic, that DCF was taking forever to get these background screenings done. And so what we've done in this legislation is try to identify a time frame when you can expect your background screening for your potential teacher to be done. That way it doesn't drag out forever on when you're trying to get these teachers into the classroom. We struggle a lot, and I hear a lot about the licensed inspectors in the state of Florida, and I hear a lot about how you're getting hit on these class 3 violations for things that aren't a repeated practice. It's just once it's over here, then once it's this issue, and once it's this issue, and that they're subjective. It's really at the determination of the person that's in there. There's no consistency across the state, and that some of the rules are duplicative. And so going along with that, what we've tried to do in this legislation is redefine what a class 3 violation is. Instead of saying a class 3 violation as it exists right now and defined by rule, if you have an incident of noncompliance, that's a class 3 violation. What we've tried to do in the legislation is redefine a class 3 to be 3 incidents of noncompliance with a class 3 standard. So if you get that 3 in a separate inspection, then that would be a class 3 violation. That way, if you have one issue not being right in a class 3, if you don't do your distracted driver brochure correctly, that's not going to be a class 3 violation. It's just an incident of noncompliance, and you fulfill that requirement. And so that's really a key component within this legislation. In addition, I think we're questioning, and many of us are questioning, like, why do I have to do these distracted driver and flu brochures every 6 months to these folks? The legislature, by and large, has basically said that's not really an indicator of childcare, quality childcare. Why are we requiring that to be a part? And so this legislation would remove that priority or remove that requirement from the law, therefore removing it from rule. In addition, again, we believe that we need to let facilities that are doing good work continue to do good work, and focus those childcare resources over towards the folks that need additional assistance. And so what we've done is we've redefined the limitation for participating in a abbreviated inspection, not to if you get a class 2 violation, but you have to have 3 of the same class 2 violations within a 2-year period. And so that's really what I wanted to kind of key. There's a couple of key points. If you'd like to see the legislation, many folks don't, they look at bills and they're like, David, explain to me, what is this, the body and the text and all of that. If you would like to see the legislation, just let us know. We'll be happy to get that to you. And so that's the key parts of House Bill 47 that have been filed. We expect that to be filed in the Senate shortly. And then as we prepare for session coming forward to move that piece of legislation. In addition, there's been some discussion over the years on water safety. There have been legislation filed in prior years that would require, if we're taking our children to a water event or a pool of some type or a swimming instruction, that there was a requirement that we would be required to know whether or not the child can swim, and if they can't swim, provide Class 3 life vest, Coast Guard approved life vests. And then make sure that they're properly fitted. I think the word that we got back from the members was, wait a second, we got all these rules already because we're licensed providers under 402(3)05. And the legislation, while it encompasses a broad swath of people that may be taking folks to a water event, in fact, I'll just read you the list. They've defined the people who are encompassed in that would be an organization as a summer day camp or a summer camp, or a preschool or a child care center or a nursery or a kindergarten. Well, I can't account for what the rules and regulations are for all of those. I can only account for what licensed facilities are. And the licensed facilities that are licensed under 402(3)05 have very exhaustive requirements prior to taking a child to a water event. And so we approached the senator last year, Senator Rodriguez, Ana Maria Rodriguez from Miami, and explained to her our situation. And what she did was she created an exemption in the bill last year. The bill didn't get through the process last year. It's been refiled this year as House Bill 413. And the good part is that it also includes the exemption. So the new requirements on all the other facilities aren't going to apply. The language says to a child care facility licensed under 402(3)05. So we can continue to do what we do under the DCF requirements and not have a new requirement on us, which I think is a good change to law. Those are the two bills that have been filed right now. I've got a series of issues that are being discussed that I feel like you just need to be aware of. They may or may not make it to legislation right now. One is school readiness eligibility. There was a lot of discussion about, well, if you increase minimum wage, what is that going to do to private childcare? Well, it's going to increase the cost that we have to pay, obviously. But what it did also in school readiness is it knocked a bunch of folks that are no longer eligible. And so there's really three issues being discussed, haven't made it to legislation yet, on school readiness eligibility. The first is changing the threshold from federal poverty to state median income. And if you change that threshold of measurement for qualification, one, the state median income is increasing because our state's doing so well, it's increasing at a higher rate. And so they believe that would be a better, more accurate reflection of people that may qualify, not the federal poverty, but the state median income. So the discussion about should we change that. The second discussion is right now you qualify at 100%, 150% of federal poverty. And the discussion is we probably ought to then, if we're going to make the change to SMI, do we want to increase the threshold of people who qualify? So right now we may be somewhere between 55 or 58% of SMI equals about 150% of federal poverty. Should we increase that to 60 or 65% of the state median income? And in doing so, you would then create a class of folks that are eligible to participate just over, if you will, that threshold that had been now knocked off the system. And the last question, which is really the nut for all of us, which is, well, is there going to be any money attached to this? If we're just going to create a bunch more people sitting around hoping to get slots in facilities, it doesn't really help out the children and families we serve. And so I don't know whether or not the legislature is going to address it, but those are the two policy discussions that are being discussed in Tallahassee. There's also a discussion going on about leased space. Many of you are Gold Seal facilities, and thank you for going through that process and spending your resources to provide higher quality than just minimum licensing standards. And we encourage that and appreciate your work in that. And as a part of that, you well know that you're considered an educational facility under Florida law, and therefore you're not subject to property tax. One of the things that is being discussed is, well, what if you're a provider that's Gold Seal, but you're in a leased space, you're in a leased facility, you don't own your facility. How do you take advantage of that? How do we give those providers the benefits of the Gold Seal in a leased space? And so there is a discussion about how can we provide a property tax exemption to people in leased space. Pretty complicated tax law. As many of you may know, in Florida, we're the only state in the country that charges a business leasing tax. It's a business rent tax. The governor's trying to repeal that down to zero. But in either case, if you're a childcare facility in a bay that somebody else owns, how do you get a property tax break? And that's something that is being discussed in Tallahassee. A couple of other issues just to be aware of. There is a discussion, and it's really in two spaces, related to shouldn't these people be licensed? And it comes into public schools that are serving under 5-year-old age. And then it also comes into the current licensing statute that exempts the licensing requirements for 5 or below. And so there is just an undercurrent of, shouldn't these people be licensed through DCF? I mean, what are we doing here? And are we just creating a loophole? That's something that I'm starting to hear conversations of in Tallahassee. And then finally, some legislation has been filed to do a full day VPK. And it's a wonderful concept and a topic. I wish they would pay more, the legislature would pay more on VPK. That comes with a really big price tag, as you might well imagine, and you're very happy to get that. I think but in addition, that's the challenge for the legislature is, in addition to the price tag, there is just a question of, well, wait a second, are the public schools, who are the ones really talking about this, is my understanding right now, public schools are talking about, hey, let's do a full day VPK. Is it really just an effort to take the money that's currently put in VPK and then allow them to pick off our older kids while leaving us with the younger children to serve? And so there's obviously some financial and policy implications to that for childcare industry in the state of Florida, particularly the private childcare industry. And so that's a short version of what we're hearing in Tallahassee. Just to kind of give you an idea where we are, we had a special session a couple weeks ago. Next week is an interim committee week. I am being told we will be having a special session next week on Wednesday and Thursday. So that remains, the governor nor the legislature has called that, but I would expect that to come here shortly. That then leads us to one more interim committee week before the legislative session starts on March 5th through March 4th through May 2nd. That's when the actual 2025 legislative session starts. With that, let me see if I've hit all of my key points. I guess just to kind of wrap it up, a couple thoughts that we could use your advice and direction on. Are we missing something in House Bill 47 that you think needs to be heard? Do you agree with the provisions in 47 and think that those are priorities? And then is there another issue that y'all are you're the early warning radar for us in Tallahassee? Hearing what's going on in the field helps us represent you in Tallahassee. So is there something that we're missing? Now would be the time to give us a heads up on that. And so with that, I will take a pause and answer any questions that might come up.
All right. Well, thank you, David. And as David shared, we are ready to transition into some Q&A. So there were a couple of questions that were posed right at the end of David's remarks there. And I'll just reiterate those for everybody. So what has been left out of House Bill 47 that we should let legislators know about? Do you have any particular thoughts or ideas related to House Bill 47 that you don't see captured in that bill? And then are there any other issues out there that FACCM and, in turn, our legislative committee can be supportive of when it comes to your business? So with that, we encourage you to enter any questions that you may have into the chat. And let's get this conversation started.
Henry, are you going to read these to me, or do I need to find these on here? Let's see here. Chat. Oh, there we are.
David, I'm happy to read these out to you.
Okay, that would be helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we have one comment here. I agree with the information in the House bill. I have one idea to add. I think it's for Broward County only. There's a new requirement that the lettering of the name on the school on the vans has to be 6 inches. That's pretty specific, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not a part of this bill in any way, shape, or form at this time, correct?
Yeah, and as I recall, I don't have my paper in front of me. I believe, and you can answer this in the text if you want, isn't Broward an LLA? And so there is only limited ability that we have in Tallahassee to influence licensing requirements for LLAs. LLAs, local licensing agencies, meet or exceed DCF requirements. And so should an LLA, I guess somebody should answer whether Broward is an LLA. I don't have that piece of paper in front of me right here, but Tripp is
Broward
Broward.
is not an LLA.
I didn't think they were. I thought Pinellas was almost about the last one left.
Yeah, there's 4 LLAs. If y'all will just give me a second and
Okay.
stall, I'll find my piece of paper that will tell me what's left. So keep going, Henry, while I'm looking. I'll answer that
Yeah,
question.
absolutely. All right. Another comment here. This may not be a part of the bill, but the 2-year-old ratio in Florida is unreasonable. Again, not related to House Bill 47, but certainly something that we appreciate you sharing and something that, we can help advocate for.
The 2-year-old ratio, could they just provide me just a little context, Henry, on that, just so I know which space we're talking about? If the
Yeah, I
person,
believe they're referring to just the ratio of staff to
ratio?
students
Yeah,
in
11 to 1,
classrooms.
I think.
Sorry, Tripp. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's 11 to 1. I mean, Jen, I don't want to speak for David here, but yeah, changing DCF licensing ratios by age, that would be a
challenging.
lift for us. We can if we get lots of feedback on that, it's interesting. It can kind of fuel what we talk about, and there could be times, but that would be a challenge to move those in a direction that would be more favorable for schools.
Yeah, Tripp, I would agree with that. I think those are Tallahassee and DCF are very sensitive in the ratio space with the children. So that would be a challenging, but I don't disagree with your comment. And just to go back, there are 4 still LLAs left in the state, Pinellas, Broward, Palm Beach, and Sarasota. And so Broward is an LLA and has still chosen to be an LLA. Hillsborough County disbanded their LLA, was the last one to disband. So there's only 4 left.
Thank you, David.
Yep.
All right, here's one. How can providers support HB 47 and advocate for its passage? Any insight there?
Yeah, there's 2 things I think you can do, and that's a great question. I hope that was a setup question for somebody that knows me, because that is right in my wheelhouse. There are 2 things you can do right now on House Bill 47. You can, number 1, you can send an email to Fiona McFarland, and you can tell Fiona, this is so needed. This is important to get done. Thank you so much. And just really thank her. She really appreciates people who, legislators, they don't go do this for the money. They're making like 24 grand for their part-time job in Tallahassee, and they get a lot of grief. So telling a legislator, thank you for doing something is really important. So that's the first thing that you can do. The second thing that you can do is reach out to your state senator and state house member and send them an email that says, please support Fiona McFarland's House Bill 447. And when the Senate bill comes out, the Senate bill number. And we can provide you, if you give us your address, we can provide you with who your state senator is and your house member and their email address. And so absolutely a wonderful question. You need to ask your legislators to support the bill, and you need to tell Fiona, good job, keep going.
Thank you, David. All right, we've got a couple questions here related to opening up a kindergarten program. One suggestion is just saying perhaps FACCM can help schools navigate the process of opening up a kindergarten program. Thank you for that suggestion. It's good food for thought for us to consider, and it's not currently a part of our strategic priorities, but definitely something that we can take and have a conversation about. So appreciate that. Someone is wondering if we could provide contact information for Fiona McFarland.
Yeah, I will see if I can put that in the chat while we're here doing that while you're reading the next question.
All right, we will work on that. Thank you.
And Henry, yeah, that's probably something you could email out to any of the participants when we're done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we can include that in the follow-up email that we send out to everyone on this call.
Perfect.
All right. We have a question here. Do you know what the time frame is that is being suggested for background screenings?
So last year in background screenings, the legislation said that DCF had to complete their background screenings within 5 days, and that if they did not complete their portion of the background screening within 5 days, that DCF would be required at the day 5, business days that is, would be required at day 5 to issue a provisional license. And we all already have a provisional license in place, a structure for provisional license as we're doing our level 2 checks and requesting what's being done on out of state. Out of state's really the struggle and why they created the provisional. This year, the bill was filed with 3 days. DCF has pushed back on that to the bill sponsors. DCF does not want to be able to do this in 3 days and move to a provisional license, but it's going to be somewhere between 3 and 5 is what we're asking the legislature. Great question.
All right. Tripp, this may be a good one for you. How does FACCM decide which legislative issues to prioritize each year?
You know, it's more art than science. And I think, you know, we have to, as a group, as a board, we sort of talk about all the issues, and then David chimes in, and sometimes it becomes this kind of like, again, sort of a soup of what's most pressing and what can we actually have influence on. You know what I mean? There are some things we simply aren't going to be able to influence that much, so we have to, you know, spend David's time and efforts and influence in areas that we think we can affect, that also will get the most bang for our buck. So, you know, would we love to double the amount that is spent per student on VPK? Yes, we would. Is that something that's in the budget? And no matter how many times we ask David to do it, it's simply not possible, right? So we'll work where we can. And so that's not much of an answer for you, but like I said, we sort of talk about all the issues. David then talks about issues that we could have some influence on. We tend to pick out the ones that would impact us either positively, or if we have to play defense against things that we could kind of play defense on, and then we decide with David. David, is that a decent answer?
Yeah, I think we have to have a process in place, and the process has to be led by providers. I don't know what it is to be a provider. My job is to be the mouthpiece for you to legislators. And so the format that we utilize is we want to hear what the members are struggling with. And you guys are grinding every day to be successful for the children and your families we serve. And then the mechanism that we use, the board of FACCM has created a legislative committee that those issues get debated in, and then the legislative committee produces an agenda that the board approves. And so issues that come up, they start bubbling up from the members to the legislative committee to the board approval. And then that's given to me to say, go get this done.
All right. We have another question here. Will abbreviated inspections for providers within DCF jurisdiction extend to local licensing agencies as well?
That's a great question. Let me just take a quick look. I believe that according to current Florida law, the LLA having to meet or exceed the DCF requirements should have to have created an abbreviated inspection program. But that I don't know whether they have or not. That would be a question of do the LLA. So just give me a second. I'll read the law. Okay, the law requires in 4023155 that in addition, the department and the local government agency shall develop and implement an abbreviated inspections programs for child care facilities. So the current law requires LLAs to have an abbreviated inspection program. Should yours have one or not have one in those 4 areas, I'm not aware. That would have to be something that you would be able to communicate to us. I'm not aware of each one of the ones, but the law requires it.
All right. Thank you, David. Here we have a comment. I have a problem with the absentee policy for VPK. If a child is sick with the flu or COVID, or breaks a leg, or is out of the country on vacation with their family, we should not be penalized for their absence. And also, if they miss the first or last day of school, we don't get paid for it. So, again, thank you very much for that information. It's definitely, again, information that we want to take back to our legislative committee, and if we see a trend here, it's something that we can certainly prioritize. So we appreciate that feedback. All right, let's see here. We have a comment here. We are currently required by DCF to have our buses inspected annually by a mechanic who fills out an inspection showing the bus is in good mechanical condition. DCF inspects us regularly and makes sure these inspections are completed. We have been in business at the same location for 15 years and have never had an issue with this process and have no objections to this. However, this year, for the first time, a state trooper visited our location and is asking us to obtain a federal DOT number so that he can complete an additional nearly identical mechanical inspection. He's informed us that they used to inspect airport buses, but can't find enough anymore to inspect. So he's now targeting preschool buses for inspections. Wow, thank you for that concern and that information. Again, that's definitely something that we will look into and see if there's a trend developing there. But
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
Henry,
never
I
heard
think
of
that's
this.
go
That's
ahead, go ahead.
Sorry, David, I'll jump in. I've never heard of this. And so I don't, that's kind of crazy. I agree, we get our vans inspected every year, just like you said in that first one, it's a system that works fine. So why someone else is coming out and inspecting, I have absolutely no idea. But this is certainly something we could look into. This would be very much the type of thing where if this had happened to someone, say on the board, then like there would be calls and emails and David can look into it and we can do a few things. So we will absolutely look into this. And Henry, if you know exactly who this person is, if we can find anything out, we can follow up with them on it and see what's going on. David, any thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's more sympathy. Like we're being required with paperwork and duplicative inspections, even on the background screening. I'm told from DCF that searching the sexual predator and sexual offender registry in the prior 5-year states is a duplicative requirement that DCF does themselves. And so it's not shocking. We need to be made aware of these things. I don't know that I can stop. I don't know what the federal DOT requirements are for your transportation methods, but double inspections for the same thing just means you're not spending time doing what the legislature wants you to do, which is taking care of these children and teaching them. And we need to identify them and highlight them and to the best we can eradicate them, because we need you to be focusing on success for your students and the families that you serve day in and day out. So thank you.
all right, we have another question here. What are some past legislative wins that FACCM has helped achieve for childcare providers?
Wow. Okay. So back when I first got started, we had a thing called, well, we still have a thing called progressive enforcement, but we had progressive enforcement in the state of Florida. And what we ended up doing in progressive enforcement was they were hitting us and we weren't giving us a chance to correct. And so one of the original pieces that I went in under licensing was saying, wait a second, if we've created or if we fixed a class 3 violation, you just can't go ahead and raise multiple class 3 violations and raise it up in the state of Florida. And so that was one of my first things that I remember tackling. We had some tax issues that we've been tackling. In addition, I've been made aware of another tax issue that's a part of this legislation. It may be more for South Florida related, where some districts, I think this is in the Weston area for those of you who may be in South Florida, they are taxing using special assessment. So you may be Gold Seal and created a tax exemption or get your tax break for being a Gold Seal at an educational facility. But we've got districts that are doing special assessments, which are effectively just property taxes, again, a different way. And so we're working to put that in legislation. But some other key reforms, I think that there's kind of a discussion in Tallahassee that is, it looks like this. Let's make quality childcare. And so how do we make childcare more quality? Well, let's just raise minimum licensing standards. Well, if you raise minimum licensing standards and think you're adjusting quality, what I think happens in the field is those that abide by the law abide by the law. those that aren't abiding by the law don't abide by the law. And then they didn't do it before and they're not going to do it now. And so what we've moved to is we've moved the test for the school readiness test, which was being used to evaluate us, but given in schools. We had that test moved from the school system back into our facilities, and we fight efforts to add requirements to 402-305. We've now moved ourselves to the point where let's just stop adding to 402-305. Now let's start amending 402-305, which is our minimum licensing standards, and start taking away some of these additional requirements. An example, not in the bill that has been highlighted, but one of the requirements in our Practice Act says that we have to provide parents with a type of communication system such as a beeper or a pager. Now, I don't know about you guys, I don't have a beeper or a pager, and I'm pretty well communicated with. And so it's things like these provisions, distracted driver brochure, flu brochure. That's really what we're trying to do. We've been the point of stopping some legislation. We've helped fix some problems. And really, as the voice for private childcare, what we're trying to do now is say, hey, DCF, work with us in this space. I know another big win. DCF came in several years ago and was trying to make our facilities have 100% CPR certified, pediatric CPR certified, and they tried to do it by rule, not because the legislature told them to do it. And we ultimately had to go in and say to DCF, no, you're really not following the law. And by the way, they said that would cost us $0 to make everybody pediatric CPR certified. So those are just a couple of examples. It started for us with, hey, can we just adjust some of these penalties and requirements? It's moved to blocking things that don't really make sense and aren't going to make childcare better. And now we're moving into the process of how do we adjust the law in a way that helps make us successful? If we don't need 535 rules, what do we need? 200? Well, let's get rid of the things that don't matter and focus on what matters. Really good question.
All right, couple comments here in the chat. We are interested in the proposal for gold seal benefits for leases. Sales back of buildings can add financial flexibility, but we would lose tax benefits. Yeah, it's great to hear those different perspectives there. David, anything that you want to add there?
Listen, it's good law. I think the complication is going to be, how do you get that through the facility owner to the facility? I mean, by concept, if I own a strip mall and I have 4 bays and one of my bays is a childcare facility, let's just pretend like they're all the same square footage. Well, then can the taxing authority provide a 25% break that gets applied to the lease, the common area maintenance, the taxes and insurance in that space? That's a complicated law for how to do that and make sure it gets to the right space. But if you're a gold seal facility, we want to encourage people to be gold seal. If you are not on this call and you're not gold seal, you need to call Henry and start down that process. There are benefits, and we need to extend those benefits to other childcare facilities. So I think that's a great point, and I guess my thumbs up too. It has not made legislation yet. It's just being talked about behind the scenes.
All right, comment here. In addition to sending us Fiona's email, please send to all attendees local county reps contact info if there is a list. Thanks. Yes, we can absolutely do that. Great suggestion.
When you reach out to Fiona, look, this is what a legislator wants to hear. They get pounded with thousands of email. Representative McFarland, I see what's going on with your House Bill 47. Thank you so much for filing this bill. This is so needed. Please call me if you have any questions. David Daniel. It doesn't have to be complicated. She's probably going to sit there and have a big smile on her face, and it's going to encourage her and to continue to push for us. It doesn't have to be something long and complicated and drawn out. She just needs to hear a thank you.
All right. Another comment here. The proposed bills reflect the needs of providers in the state, and we appreciate the work being done. Downside could be if there are enough dollars allocated to the coalitions to pass the benefits on to providers. Our coalition has not placed new children since September. Seems like there are no dollars to pass on. Is this a problem statewide?
So I'm not going to be able to answer that question statewide, but I have heard that some of the coalitions are holding back on that. There's a lot of discussion about, is there a wait list? Why are coalitions not spending their money but requesting more money? And then there's always a big conversation about, how do we get the money out of the middleman, if you will, to the people that are doing the work? We've made several strides with encouraging the legislature to increase school readiness reimbursement rates and equate and make them same across the board. We've also pushed very hard on VPK rates and have seen significant increases, not as much as they've given to the public school system by, but we've made some strides in that space. But yeah, at the end of the day, if the legislature wants to make VPK valuable in the training, and it shows in the testing that a child that has been through one of our facilities is better prepared for school, then they need to put the money into that child, into VPK BSA rates and in the SR reimbursement rates. Because to the extent the SR reimbursement rate is nowhere near your tuition, you're not really helping out that family to get to a more quality facility. Good comment.
All right. What are the benefits of being a FACCM member, especially during the legislative session? I can start by jumping in here. We provide weekly updates to all of our members about what's happening in the legislature. So if you're a FACCM member, you'll get access to those communications. Of course, as a FACCM member, you pay an annual membership. That membership goes directly to the legislative work that we do. So that is, important funding that, David and our legislative committee need to take your priorities and, get them to Tallahassee and affect change. As a FACCM member, you also have access to a lot of other benefits, resources, FACCM Connect presentations, that non-FACCM members do not. So certainly during the legislative session, it's important to be a FACCM member, but we feel that it's important for you to be a FACCM member year-round, because the work does not just occur during session itself. It's a process that reoccurs every year. So those of you that are FACCM members, thank you for continuing to, believe in the work that we do. And those of you that are not currently FACCM members, before we wrap up today, I'll put a slide up and a QR code, and you can just scan that code and join FACCM today if that's something that you're interested in. Tripp, David, anything else that either of you want to add just about benefits of FACCM membership?
Yeah, I'd love to dive in on that. Our firm represents somewhere 85 to 90 clients, represent Johnson & Johnson in the state of Florida, represent public supermarkets. We represent a lot of global companies and corporations and people that are doing business in the state of Florida. And what I want my childcare providers to do is to be good, to be excellent at what you do in your community. I don't need you to recreate a government affairs program and learn how to read legislation, but someone's got to be watching your back. And at the end of the day, I think some of these provisions that are in bills are things that we've gotten taken out, or how we've fought DCF on some licensing issues, are things that we don't want you to have to worry about. And so the first benefit, I think, is we want you to be able to know that your dollars that are going to FACCM are helping protect you and helping your ability to make money so you can serve your clients. I think the second part of this is the only way this works is if we get from the field what's going on practically. Hey, did this bill not go far enough? What else should we consider adding to this bill that will help take the burden off of you so you can focus on the children and the families that you serve? And so I think whether it's things that we have fought for to keep off of your plate, the fact that you're not included in having to buy Coast Guard approved life vests if you want to do a water activity, other pieces of legislation, you can create a whole government affairs program in your childcare facility and do that, or you can pay a nominal fee to FACCM membership and have that done for you. So I think it's both what's not being placed onto you and things that we need to adjust to adjust in a way that make you more effective. And so that would be my answer to that question.
Yeah, well said, David. And there are other things over the years. I mean, teaching strategies gold used to be a requirement at VPK, and it's not anymore. And at one point there was going to be a requirement that everyone before they even started had to have pediatric first aid and CPR training. And that's not a rule right now. So we can't scream a lot of these from the mountaintop, but we certainly have influence on things that I promise you have been beneficial to running our business and to keeping childcare as affordable as possible while keeping the quality as possible. But there is strength in numbers. I mean, as a round number, there are 10,000 licensed childcare facilities in the state of Florida. If all 10,000 were FACCM members, we would have a lot more influence. I'll just leave it that way. We would have more dollars to spend. legislators would know we had 10,000 members. That speaks volumes. They would know that we had some legislative power and some political power up there, and when we would have a lot more influence. So we're getting there. We don't have near 10,000 right now, but we have a lot, and we're thankful for all the people that help us out. And we want you to maybe, if you're not a member, to join, mention it to other people in your county or in your area or in your sphere of influence, to consider joining FACCM and letting us do our work up in Tallahassee for all of us. Henry, I'll hand it off to you.
All right. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for all of your questions and comments today. It was a real wonderful conversation, and I apologize if we missed anything. We will be, looking through the transcript of the chat, and if we did miss you, we'll make sure to follow up with you individually to get your question answered. I want to also, thank Tripp and thank David for joining this afternoon and sharing their expertise with the audience. We certainly appreciate that.
Can I add one thing real fast?
Yeah.
There's a few, I see Andrew and Rock Springs Academy have had some questions that maybe we weren't able to get to with our time restrictions. Maybe you can reach out to me or David after this call, get some answers to those as best we can, and maybe you can get back with the group and answer some of those even through email or something. That way, even if we didn't hit it now, if they were asked, we might be able to at least address those a little bit, and you can prepare those and get them to us so we can have them for the legislative committee. Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right, so before we wrap up, just two quick announcements for everybody. We have another legislative town hall coming up in May, and this will be after the session concludes on Thursday, May 8th. This is going to be exclusive to FACCM members. So if you're not currently a FACCM member, now is the perfect time to join so you can register for this next session and again, gain access to the resources and information that we send on a weekly basis leading up to and throughout the legislative session. So there's a QR code on the screen. If you're not a FACCM member, we encourage you to scan that and join FACCM today so you can be a part of this network. Second thing I just want to mention is that in the next 24 hours, you're going to receive a follow-up communication from us with Representative McFarland's contact info of your local representatives. We're also going to have a survey in there for you about today's session. We would certainly love your feedback about House Bill 47. If you haven't had a chance to look at it yet and you want to take a look and share that with us in the survey, or just general legislative concerns. And of course, again, anything that we missed in the chat or the Q&A today, we'll follow up with you individually and get an answer for you. Your input is crucial to ensuring that we effectively advocate for your needs. So again, thank you, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So to conclude, I'm going to just put my contact information up on the screen, as well as the contact info of FACCM's Executive Director, Dr. Glenn Mort. Dr. Mort had a procedure done yesterday, so wasn't able to join us today, but certainly echoes everything that David and Tripp and I have shared with you this afternoon. So if you have questions, concerns, feel free to reach out directly to either one of us, and we're here to listen and help make your center a place that is serving children and to the highest degree, and ensuring that your center has access to all the resources that it deserves. So once again, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.